I'm gonna keep this anonymous for obvious reasons, but I need to document what happened before I convince myself it was nothing. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm a graduate student at a university in the Pacific Northwest, finishing my MERs in data science, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had the ideal living situation. I moved into this shared house last August with 2 other people I found through the university housing board. The rent was reasonable, the location was perfect, walking distance to campus, and my housemates seemed normal enough during our initial meetup. There was Jenna, who was doing her PhD in environmental science, and Marcus, who worked in tech and mostly kept to himself. The house itself was older, one of those converted craftsman-style places with 3 bedrooms upstairs and common spaces on the main floor. We each had our own bathroom, which honestly was the selling point for me because I value my privacy. We established ground rules early on: quiet hours after 10 p.m., a shared cleaning rotation, and no overnight guests without notice. Standard roommate stuff. Everything functioned smoothly for months. We weren't friends exactly, but we coexisted peacefully. Jenna was gone most days doing field research. Marcus worked from home but stayed in his room, and I kept busy with coursework and my assistantship. We'd occasionally cross paths in the kitchen and exchange pleasantries, but nothing substantial. The first strange thing I noticed was maybe 6 weeks ago when I came home late from the library, probably around midnight, and saw the basement door slightly open. We never used the basement. The landlord had mentioned it was just for storage and mechanical systems. I closed it and didn't think much about it, but then it kept happening. Maybe once a week I'd find that basement door open just a crack. I asked Jenna and Marcus about it separately, and both claimed they never went down there and had no explanation. I started making a mental note each time, wondering if maybe the house was settling or the latch was faulty. Around the same time, I began noticing food disappearing from my shelf in the fridge. Small things at first, like a container of yogurt or some leftovers. I'm pretty organized, so I knew I wasn't misremembering. When I brought it up at our monthly house meeting, both of them looked genuinely confused. Jenna suggested maybe I was eating more than I realized because of stress, and Marcus just shrugged. I let it go, but I started keeping my important food items in my room. That's when things escalated. I began hearing sounds at night. Not loud sounds, just subtle creaking from somewhere below my room. Old houses make noise, I told myself. Pipes expanding, wood settling, all of that. But these sounds had a pattern. They'd start around 2 a.m. and continue for maybe 30 minutes. One night, I couldn't sleep and decided to investigate, creeping downstairs as quietly as possible with every horror movie I'd ever seen playing in my mind. The basement door was open again. I stood at the top of the stairs listening. Nothing, just darkness and that musty smell old basements have. I pulled up my phone, turned on the flashlight, and started descending. The basement was exactly what you'd expect. Concrete floor, exposed beams, the furnace in one corner, and some boxes stacked against the walls. I swept my light around, feeling ridiculous. There was nothing there. I was about to go back upstairs when my light caught something that made my stomach drop. In the far corner, partially hidden behind the furnace, there was a sleeping bag, and next to it, a small pile of personal items, a toothbrush, some clothes, and a half-empty water bottle. Someone had been living down there.
I didn't scream, I just froze, trying to process what I was seeing. My brain immediately went to homeless person, but that didn't make sense. How would they get in? We kept the doors locked. Then I noticed something else. Sitting on top of the pile of clothes was a university ID card. I moved closer, hands shaking, and picked it up. The photo showed a young guy, maybe early 20s, with dark hair and tired eyes. The name read David Chen. I didn't recognize him. The ID was current, issued this academic year. I took a photo of it with my phone and got out of that basement as fast as I could. Back in my room with the door locked, I tried to think rationally. I searched the university directory for David Chen. There were 3, but none of the photos matched the ID I had found. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? There's evidence someone might be staying in our basement, but I haven't actually seen them. I decided to tell Jenna and Marcus the next morning. We convened in the kitchen over coffee, and I showed them the photo of the ID. The reaction I got was not what I expected. Marcus went pale. Jenna wouldn't make eye contact. After a long, uncomfortable silence, Marcus finally spoke. He told me David was his younger brother. Apparently, David had been struggling financially and mentally, dropped out of school the previous semester, and was essentially homeless. Marcus had been letting him stay in the basement without telling anyone. The food I'd noticed missing, Marcus had been taking it down to him. I should have been angry, and part of me was, but mostly I just felt this wave of sadness mixed with fear. I asked why David couldn't just stay in Marcus's room, or why Marcus didn't ask if we'd be okay with another person in the house. Marcus explained that David had issues, didn't want to be around people, and preferred isolation. He made it sound almost reasonable. Jenna admitted she'd known about it for a few weeks. Marcus had told her and asked her not to say anything. She looked guilty, but also defensive, saying she didn't think it was her place to tell me. I felt betrayed by both of them, but I also understood they thought they were helping someone in need. We agreed David needed to leave. I wasn't comfortable with someone I didn't know living secretly in the house, regardless of circumstances. Marcus said he'd handle it and that David would be gone by the weekend. I wanted to believe that would be the end of it. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. I kept thinking about this stranger who had been living below me for weeks, listening to me move around, existing in the same space without my knowledge. The violation of it sat heavy in my chest. The next morning, I woke up early and checked the basement. The sleeping bag and belongings were gone. Marcus confirmed David had left during the night and said he was going to stay with a friend in Seattle. I wanted to feel relieved, but something felt off. The way Marcus wouldn't quite look at me when he said it. A week passed, and things returned to a tense version of normal. I started looking for a new place to live, sending out applications and checking listings. I couldn't stay there anymore. The trust was broken, but finding housing mid-year near campus is difficult, and I had to wait for something to open up. Then, 4 nights ago, I heard the sounds again, that same creaking from below my room, the subtle movement. I lay in bed paralyzed, telling myself it was just pipes, just the house settling, but I knew better. I knew exactly what it was. I didn't go down to check. I didn't confront Marcus. I just lay there until morning, and when the sun came up, I packed a bag and left. I've been staying with a friend since then, and I told Marcus I wouldn't be back until the lease ends in June. He kept texting me asking why I left, saying everything was fine and that I was overreacting. Yesterday, I contacted the landlord and explained the situation. He was furious with Marcus and said he'd handle it, that he'd personally check the basement and change the locks if necessary. I don't know what he found or if David is really gone now. Honestly, I don't want to know. What bothers me most isn't even that someone was living there secretly. It's that Marcus thought it was acceptable to let that continue, that Jenna knew and said nothing, and that both of them prioritized David's situation over my right to feel safe in my own home. I keep wondering what else they didn't tell me. I've been checking the university news looking for any mention of incidents or arrests, but there's nothing. Maybe David is gone. Maybe he's staying somewhere else now. Or maybe he's still there, in that basement, and Marcus is still covering for him. I genuinely don't know, and that uncertainty is eating at me. I'm finding a new place as soon as possible. Until then, I'm not going back.
This is going to sound unbelievable, but every word is accurate. My name is Alex. I'm 31, I work remotely as a software developer, and I live alone in a cabin in rural Montana. I've been here for 2 years, and it's exactly the kind of isolation I wanted when I left the city. The nearest town is 40 minutes away, the nearest neighbor is 3 miles down an unpaved road, and most days, I don't see another human being. I bought the property because of the seclusion and because it backs up to national forest land, endless hiking, wildlife, and complete silence except for wind and birds. I've always been more comfortable alone than in crowds, and this place gave me the space to think, work, and exist without the constant noise of civilization. About 5 months ago, I decided to set up some trail cameras around the property, partly for security and partly because I wanted to see what animals were passing through. I'm not a hunter, just curious. I positioned 3 cameras at different points, one near the driveway, one overlooking the back deck, and one deeper in the woods along a game trail I'd noticed. For the first few weeks, the footage was exactly what I expected: deer, elk, a few coyotes, and occasional birds. I'd check the SD cards every week or so, scroll through the motion-triggered clips, delete most of them. It became a routine, something to break up the monotony. Then, I started noticing the person. The first time was in footage from the camera on the game trail. A figure walked past, partially obscured by trees, moving away from my cabin and deeper into the forest. It was daytime, and the image quality was decent enough to see that it was a man of average height wearing dark clothing and a backpack. I assumed it was a hiker who had wandered off the main trail system. I didn't think much of it. People occasionally cut through the national forest, even though there aren't official trails in that section. I made a mental note to maybe post some private property signs, but I wasn't concerned. The national forest is public land, and as long as people weren't coming onto my immediate property, I didn't care. The second sighting was different. It was the same camera 3 days later, but this time the figure was walking toward my cabin. It was early morning, just after dawn. Same person, I thought, based on the clothing and build, but the direction bothered me. If you're hiking through, you don't double back the same route. You make a loop, or you head out the way you came. I checked the other cameras. Nothing on the driveway camera, nothing on the back deck. So this person had approached through the woods, gotten close enough to trigger the game trail camera, and then presumably turned back before reaching my actual cabin. That struck me as odd, but I still tried to rationalize it. Maybe they realized they were on private land and turned around. Maybe they were lost. Over the next month, I captured that same figure 7 more times.
Always on the game trail camera, always moving in different directions, but always during hours when I was likely to be inside or asleep. I started to feel uneasy. This wasn't random hikers. This was someone repeatedly coming to the same area near my property with no clear purpose. I decided to move the game trail camera closer to the cabin, positioning it to cover the area between the tree line and my back deck. If this person was going to keep appearing, I wanted better footage. I wanted to see their face, get a clear image I could potentially take to the sheriff if necessary. 2 days after repositioning the camera, I got what I was looking for, and I immediately wished I hadn't. The footage showed the figure emerging from the woods around 3 a.m. They walked directly toward the cabin, stopped maybe 50 feet from the back deck, and just stood there for 11 minutes, just standing, facing the cabin, completely still. The image quality was good enough that I could make out details. Male, probably in his 40s, wearing a heavy coat despite it being summer, with a dark beanie pulled low. He had a beard, though I couldn't see much of his face because of the camera angle and the low light. But the thing that made my blood run cold was what he was holding. Binoculars. He was watching my cabin through binoculars at 3 a.m. After those 11 minutes, he turned and walked back into the woods, disappearing from frame. I watched that clip probably 20 times, trying to understand what I was seeing. This wasn't someone lost. This wasn't a hiker. This was someone deliberately surveilling my property in the middle of the night. I called the sheriff's department the next morning. I explained the situation and sent them the footage. A deputy came out that afternoon, looked at the clips, and walked the perimeter of my property. He took a report and said they'd increase patrols in the area, but he was honest with me about the limitations. The person hadn't technically done anything illegal, They are in the national forest, which is public land, and watching someone's house from a distance isn't a crime. And that's what this feels like now. Not random, not opportunistic, purposeful. I don't know who this person is or what they want. I don't know if they'll come back, but I know I can't stay here anymore. The peace I came here to find has been completely destroyed, replaced by constant vigilance and fear. Every shadow outside could be them. Every sound in the night could be their footsteps. I'm writing this from my cabin, but I'm leaving tomorrow. I'll stay with friends in town while the security system gets installed and while I figure out my next steps. Maybe I'll come back once things are secure. Maybe I won't. Right now, I just need to be somewhere I don't feel like prey.
I work downtown in a major city on the East Coast. I'm not going to say which one because I still work in the same building and I don't need this traced back to me. I'm 27, I work in marketing, and this started happening about 8 weeks ago. I need to get it documented somewhere because the lack of resolution is driving me insane. My company is on the 14th floor of a high-rise office building, and there's a connected parking garage, one of those massive concrete structures with 8 levels. My assigned spot is on level 5, section C, and I've parked there every workday for the past 3 years. It's routine. Drive in, park, take the elevator up, and reverse the process at the end of the day. The garage is well lit and there are security cameras everywhere, though I never paid much attention to them. There are always people coming and going, so I never felt unsafe. It's a public space in the middle of a business district. Nothing bad happens there. About 2 months ago, I started noticing a vehicle parked near my spot. A white van with no windows on the sides, slightly dirty like it had been driven through weather. It wasn't always in the exact same spot, but it was always within a few spaces of mine, always on level 5. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Parking garages are for parking vehicles. People have vans. But then I realized it was there every single day. When I arrived in the morning, it was there. When I left in the evening, it was still there, and I never saw anyone get in or out of it. That struck me as unusual. If someone parks in a garage connected to an office building, they're presumably going to that building for work. But this van just sat there day after day, unmoving. I started paying closer attention. I'd walk past it each morning and evening, glancing at it, looking for any signs of movement or occupation. The windows were tinted dark enough that I couldn't see inside. There were no company logos, no identifying marks, just a plain white van that appeared to be perpetually parked. After about a week of this, I mentioned it to a coworker during lunch. She said she'd noticed it too and thought it was weird, but assumed it belonged to maintenance or building security. That made sense. I thought maybe it was a utility vehicle or something, so I let it go. But it kept bothering me. So one evening, instead of going straight to my car, I walked past the van and stopped. I pretended to be on my phone, standing maybe 10 feet away, watching it peripherally. After a few minutes, I saw movement. The van rocked slightly, like someone had shifted their weight inside. Someone was in there. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't a parked utility vehicle. This was an occupied van that had been sitting in the same garage near my car for over a week. I walked quickly to my car, got in, locked the doors, and left. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. The next morning, I reported it to building security. I explained the situation and said there was a van on level 5 that seemed to be permanently parked with someone inside. The security guard, a guy named Ron, who I'd seen around but never really talked to, said he'd check it out. He seemed skeptical but wrote down the information. When I came back from lunch that day, Ron found me in the lobby. He said he'd reviewed the camera footage and confirmed the van had been there for 11 days straight. He'd also walked the garage and located the van, but it appeared empty and there were no signs of anyone inside. He said he'd keep monitoring it, but unless the vehicle was causing a problem or violating parking regulations, there wasn't much he could do.
I appreciated that he'd looked into it, but his response didn't make me feel better. I knew someone had been inside that van. I'd seen it move, but I couldn't prove it, and apparently the cameras hadn't captured anyone entering or exiting. How was that possible? For the next week, I changed my routine. I started parking on a different level, level 3, as far from the van as I could get. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, just to avoid walking past level 5. It felt silly, like I was overreacting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Then I got the photo. It was sent to my work email from an anonymous account. No subject line, no message, just an attachment. When I opened it, my entire body went cold. It was a photo of me taken from behind, walking through the parking garage. Based on the angle and the surroundings, it had been taken from inside the white van.
I immediately forwarded it to building security and called Ron. He came up to my floor within minutes. We went through the email and traced the sender, but the account had been created specifically to send that one message and then abandoned. Ron escalated it to a supervisor, and they contacted the police. A detective came to the building that afternoon. She took my statement, reviewed the security footage with Ron, and examined the email. She was professional and thorough, but she was also clear about the limitations. The photo itself wasn't technically a crime. It was taken in a semi-public space. The anonymous email was concerning, but not illegal. Unless there was a direct threat or harassment continued, there wasn't much they could do beyond file a report. She did, however, recommend that building security have the van towed if it violated any parking policies. Ron checked, and technically the van was fine. It had valid plates, it wasn't blocking anything, and there was no time limit on parking in that garage if you had a monthly pass, which the van apparently did. The detective also suggested I document everything, vary my schedule, consider parking elsewhere entirely, and call immediately if I received any more messages or felt threatened. Standard advice, I suppose, but it left me feeling helpless. Someone had photographed me, sent it to my work email to make sure I knew I was being watched, and there was no recourse.
I stopped parking in that garage entirely. I started using a public lot 3 blocks away and walking to the office. It added time to my commute and cost more money, but I couldn't bring myself to go back into that structure. Every time I thought about it, I'd picture that van, picture someone sitting inside it with a camera, watching me walk past day after day. 3 weeks passed without incident. No more emails, no more sightings. I started to relax slightly, convincing myself that whoever it was had moved on. Maybe the police visit scared them off. Maybe they'd gotten bored. I didn't know, but the absence of activity felt like progress. Then, 4 days ago, I got another email. Same anonymous format, same lack of message, but this time the photo was different. It was taken recently, within the past week based on what I was wearing, and it wasn't taken in the parking garage. It was taken on the street outside the public lot where I'd been parking instead. They'd followed me. They knew I'd changed locations, and they wanted me to know they knew. The message was clear. Switching parking lots wouldn't help. They could find me anywhere. I went straight to the police station after receiving that email. The same detective met with me, reviewed the new photo, and added it to my file. She was more concerned this time and said the pattern indicated escalating behavior. She recommended I consider a restraining order, but she also pointed out that we didn't know who we were restraining. We had no identity, no name, just a van and anonymous emails. She did say they'd increase patrols around the area, both the office building and the public lot. She also connected me with a victim advocate who could help me develop a safety plan. It was all helpful in theory, but the practical reality remained. Someone was stalking me, and nobody could stop them because we didn't know who they were. I've taken additional precautions. I've varied my route to work. I've started parking in different lots on different days. I've informed my employer, and they've been supportive, allowing me to work from home more frequently. I've told my friends and family what's happening. Everyone is concerned. Everyone wants to help, but there's only so much anyone can do. The white van is gone from the parking garage now. Ron confirmed it hasn't been there for over 2 weeks. That should make me feel better, but it doesn't, because now I don't know where it is. At least when it was parked in the same spot every day, I knew where the threat was. Now, it could be anywhere. I haven't received another email in 4 days. Part of me hopes that's the end of it, that whoever this is got bored or scared and decided to stop. But another part of me, the part that wakes me up at night with my heart pounding, knows that silence doesn't mean safety. It just means I don't know what's coming next. I'm considering moving, maybe even changing jobs, leaving the city entirely. It feels extreme, but I don't know what else to do. This person has demonstrated they can find me, photograph me, track my movements, and I still have no idea who they are or what they want. If you're reading this and you work downtown in a parking garage, pay attention to the vehicles around you. Notice if something doesn't change, if it's always there. Trust your instincts, because I didn't, not at first. And now I'm living in constant fear of what might happen next.